On this episode of Athletic Training Chat, we have Greg Winkelman, who is one of our co hosts, but just sort of recently finished up a data analysis boot camp, and that is what we're talking about in this episode. And really, it's something that we've seen pop up a lot more on social media, but really haven't talked to anybody on the podcast about it and applying it to the athletic training profession. That is a huge thing, obviously, for many reasons, whether it's showing value, rehab, performance, whatever it may be. And so, really, this was kind of just getting some insight from Greg on what he took away from this boot camp, how he's applied it, how it's been beneficial, and really, if people are looking to go this route, is it something that is worth the investment and that he sees as something that could be really powerful for athletic trainers. So that is the main focus of this, which I think is a huge and really interesting and future coming topic. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Please consider them for all your sports medicine needs. Lots of things that they've done, things that are coming out. If you're going to NATA here coming up in a little over a month after this recording, please check them out. They always have something that they want to connect with and show and just really interact with athletic trainers to see what they can do to help. Without further ado, please enjoy this episode. This episode of Athletic Training Chat, we are on with host slash guest Greg Winkelman. And the reason we are doing an episode with Greg is he has completed, probably a little while ago now, a data analytics boot camp. Or I'll let him get into all the details of what it is. And we just did a follow up call on something else just a week or so ago, and we got talking about it. And it does seem like it is going, and if not is currently the wave that is going to make the next big kind of move in a lot of different things. And, everybody talks about data and value and how to tie all that together. And so I will also come back with, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more, Greg, later. So if I don't forget, tell me to come back to it. But like using this to tell a story with the data to make it that much more impactful. So just a quick little background on Greg. He did his undergrad and graduate work at UW La Crosse with his master's in athletic training. He did an internship with the Denver Broncos, has now been working back in Wisconsin in clinic slash high school outreach. And then obviously we were talking about this boot camp. So I'll turn it over to you if you want to talk just a little bit about, what prompted you to go and take this boot camp, what exactly it is, in terms of boot camp, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, so basically, with my time at the Broncos, it really opened my eyes up to all of the technology that you just don't get to see at some of the smaller settings. Sorry if you hear that. That's a big jet flying over, apparently. Um, so yeah, I really kind of got a little bit of hands-on with some of the technology there. And as soon as I got back to working in Wisconsin, I saw a lot of kind of newer job postings for a lot of like sports performance and healthcare kind of innovation stuff that they were looking for data analysts. So I kind of just did some, quick Google searching and whatnot. And I found that there's a ton of these data boot camps. And a lot of them are very, very similar in how they're structured, but it's kind of a fast track way to really learn a lot of the basics and some of the more advanced skills in data analytics. And so I just figured, why not? It pairs really well with just about any profession, to be honest with you. But I feel like, especially in the athletic training, sports performance, kind of team sports setting, it's one of those things that you see more and more of it, and I think you're going to see a ton of it here in the future. when a lot of those products and other technology pieces become just, more available and affordable for, some of these, what I would say like lower end settings budget wise. So I think, there's a ton of upside to pursuing data, but I will say it's definitely not for everyone. It's a lot of computer work, a lot of coding, which I honestly didn't. I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't know the extent of kind of the computer knowledge that obviously you learn it and gain it through the educational piece, but coming into the boot camp with a little bit of that computer knowledge would definitely kind of put you ahead in a lot of ways. So. Um, I guess long story short, that's kind of how I came onto it. And now I'm just kind of plugging in ways that I can use it and kind of build my own portfolio for any potential, kind of future opportunities.
Awesome. You can feel free just to speak in kind of generalities around some of the technology that you saw. If you can't share, I understand trade secrets per the NFL and just kind of talking with other previous ones. But was it GP? Was the things that you saw that you were realizing the benefit? Was it the GPS? Activity monitoring. Were there other things? Again, if you can speak in generals, that'd be great. Without obviously giving away anything.
Yeah, so I can definitely say a lot on it. So from my knowledge and just from doing a lot of research and then obviously seeing it firsthand with the Broncos, especially GPS things, catapults, kind of the big one. They are everywhere in the elite sports setting. And I figured that they were kind of everywhere, but I didn't realize to the extent that they use them for.
Sure.
I kind of thought, yeah, the sports performance team will use it to, maybe track their accelerations and stuff like that. But they're wearing them for rehabs. They're wearing them for, just about any sort of exercise, routine. And along with the GPS, I would say valid performance is another thing to look into. So
Yeah.
they are kind of one of the gold standards for exercise science technology. Um, and I didn't really see any of that firsthand, but I know that Vald works with a ton of, professional soccer, professional football, kind of your higher end budget places. But they have some really unique equipment that, measures eccentric strength, concentric strength. You can kind of pair a lot of their technology together to get data on your athletes. So I would say those are kind of the two of the bigger ones that come to mind. The other thing too is I didn't realize how many apps and kind of just general like questionnaire tracking goes on at the higher level there. So they answer a lot of questions about how they slept, how they feel, how sore are you, stuff like that, where in hindsight, you might think, oh, they're just kind of looking for a couple guys to kind of pick out maybe that, their answers aren't super great for the day. But when you can actually sit down and analyze that data, you can find a lot more kind of holes and different things that you can make inferences from. So I think it's definitely caught on and it's spreading because there's so many ways that you can manipulate the data and really find those people that are maybe at a high risk for a muscle strain or high risk for concussion or just kind of various things like that where yeah we can't prevent every injury but this data analytics stuff it really kind of adds the potential to prevent a lot of those things that we thought maybe yeah you can prevent ankle sprains from doing an ankle program but how far can we push that and the data is really um, showing insights on how we can further prevent injuries and really make those things meaningful and worth the investment.
Appreciate that oversight. Kind of going off of that, any initial applications that you found useful? You kind of talked about, building your portfolio, even if you haven't necessarily started something. Being at a high school, um, having a lot of your experience at a Division III institution, even if they're not at necessarily applications that you have put into practice, initial ones, that you would see in those two settings, that don't have the endless amount of budget. I mean, the Vault that you mentioned, or Valid, however they pronounce it, like we've definitely looked at those too, but the subscription model makes it tough to come up with
Yes.
the repeat funding. So, that isn't something that a lot of people have the financial access to. But so anything from your previous experience and your current experience that you'd be like, here would be an impactful yet free slash affordable thing that you would look to implement.
Yeah, so right now I've been kind of fortunate enough to take over a lot of the strength and conditioning at the high school that I'm at,
Okay.
which is it's a very large high school too. So we get usually very good turnouts with the team workouts, and a lot of it's early in the morning. So the kids are putting in the work. So I figured, if they're gonna show up here at 5:36 a.m., then we might as well get a little bit of data collection. So obviously, without some of those, like the valid tools would be super nice to have in the weight room, or even force plates and stuff like that. But at the high school level, it's been just a lot of, tracking distances. We'll measure their broad jump once in a while. We'll measure sprint times for various distances. Kind of one rep maxes for everything. And just tracking and storing that data has helped a lot in just determining, okay, are we doing enough? Are we doing too much? What does just this growth curve look like? And, obviously every kid is going to be different in their performance and how fast that they gain strength and gain size and show some of those but when you're not tracking that, you really don't have an idea. I mean, sure, the eye test, you can pick out a few kids that look like they've gained some, good lean muscle mass. But when you start taking data, you really get to realize kind of things as a whole versus kind of picking out those specific one or two athletes and making your decisions based on them. So I would say right now, I just do a lot of even just Excel work. Um, so our first day in boot camp, which was 24 weeks, was all Excel. And then second day was moving on to the next program. So
Jeez.
yep, it's very fast paced, but even just that one day of Excel coverage has really helped me develop a lot of interactive tables and things that I normally wouldn't have known to do. Um, and so just, using Excel right now has been big. At the clinic, I haven't necessarily gotten a whole lot of data stuff done, but I've talked to some of the supervisors and stuff, and it would be nice to use some of this data stuff to figure out, okay, where could we increase our revenue? Where are we maybe struggling in areas that we can improve on? Just in more of a clinical sense. So the clinic that I'm at it's a lot of orthopedic surgeons, and then a good amount of non-surgical sports medicine docs as well. So I would be curious to get a data set from them and just kind of see, are there big differences between seeing a surgical provider and a non-surgical provider? What are kind of our moneymaker injuries that we should be, really inviting people into to treat? Just, kind of general stuff like that would be obviously very good for the financial uh,
Hmm.
that they're running, but also just to better understand the clientele around the area too. So maybe if we did want to expand to sports performance or something that is similar and would drive in more patients, I think we could kind of find a better target audience for something like that.
Awesome. You kind of highlighted a few different things that you were looking to do, but even beyond that, where do you see this potential skill set being the most useful within the AT profession specifically? And if you wanted to, pick a setting or, one that you see being more applicable kind of from your mixed bag of experiences, please highlight that.
Yeah, so I think it's really going to blow up and be noticeable in the collegiate setting here, if it already isn't at a lot of these bigger colleges. But the fact that a lot of EMRs now will kind of automatically pool data, and depending on kind of how high up you are, like the NFL, for instance, a lot of teams work with Kitman Labs, And that's another just industry leader in really looking at the data, analyzing it, giving back information to teams that's, individual specific and can really kind of benefit them in the long run. But so I use Kitman for an example because they are in charge of the NFL's whole EMR system now. And so
Okay.
if your EMR team is also the team that is known for sports performance data analytics, you're in a really good spot there for picking out different things that will help advance your team. And none of that is really work that the team's athletic trainers necessarily have to do themselves. Obviously, they have to document the injuries and the notes and all that stuff, but all of the actual analysis is done on the back end. So I think that model is going to carry over to the collegiate setting to where you might not necessarily have to go through data analytic training, but that stuff is going to be more readily available to you, and it's going to be kind of up to you to kind of differentiate what the report is saying and okay, why were they measuring hamstring elasticity or why were they looking into these, certain metrics? And I think that's the piece that as long as people grasp that, they'll be in a really good spot as a practitioner to change some of the ways that they do rehab or performance or, whatever the case is. But I think that would be the biggest thing is just the overall expansion of this stuff in the kind of that sports medicine sense. It's still a little split between performance and like injury prevention per se,
Sure.
but that bridge is starting to definitely come together and kind of become one. And I think that that is going to help teams tremendously. So I would say the collegiate setting is going to be kind of the next big boom, especially because it's worked here for couple of years in the pro settings. So a lot of worldwide soccer and a lot of the bigger name things like the NFL, NBA, NHL, they've been very successful with this. Obviously, they have the money to fund those things, but as more of that stuff becomes available, I think it's going to be more affordable for these places, and I think it's going to even branch down to the high school level. There's so much stake in recruiting nowadays that, what's to say recruiters aren't going to ask for your, certain data on like the NFL combine statistics and stuff like that. So I know in the Milwaukee area, there's football combines all the time, but yeah, you'll get a laser 40 time and you'll get a bench press, mark and all this stuff. But if you can kind of analyze that data and show, potential colleges, hey, this is where I was at 6 months ago, this is where I'm at now. I think that's going to be a huge piece in some of these bigger schools pulling the trigger on recruiting.
You talked about the NFL and just now that some of that stuff's kind of being outsourced, not directly, for the analytics, right within the club. And so this may be a little bit more of a hypothetical question for you. I'm just speaking a little bit from not a ton of personal experience because I've never truly worked with like a data scientist in any role that I've had. Obviously at UWL, we had PhD researchers and it was kind of data. And we did some stuff with monitoring with a couple different teams as well. But do you see, again, and it all depends on resources. And so that all comes into this because it's not broad strokes, but, a lot of places now, especially the college level, have your athletic training staff and your strength and conditioning staff kind of regardless of that. I think that's becoming, especially at bigger high schools, more common where you've got kind of dedicated, but is there a way or how do you see ats and strength and conditioning coaches working together with that data, kind of making sure it's a partnership in what you're looking at, or is it, do you think, going to require kind of that third party sports scientist in quotes or data analyst that's able to try and provide a little bit more of an objective, like here's what we have, here's where we think we could make some benefits, so it's not just the AT trying to put, or the strength coach for that matter, trying to put like, oh, injury risk reduction is my thing. Like that's what I'm supposed to do, or type of a turf war, if you will.
Yeah, so I mean, I can see both sides of it, and I think both have, big advantages. But I think ideally it would be nice to just have the athletic training staff and the sports performance staffs work together. I think when you look at a lot of, especially in the high school level, you look at a lot of the successful high schools, those two people get along really well because that's kind of all you have for
Sure.
you're as far as athletics goes, you got an athletic director, you got coaches, and then you might be lucky enough to have a strength and conditioning coach. That might just be, a lot of times it's your varsity football coach that mans the weight room. So I think just establishing those relationships is really the biggest piece. And as long as you have that good working relationship where, I'll walk into the weight room and say, hey, this kid right here, he needs to limit, legs today. He needs to really watch his hamstrings. And I'm in a, fortunate position to where they take that information and there's really no questions asked. It's, okay, we'll send them back if anything happens type thing. And I think if, the data is really just that extra piece to where if you can train your, kind of performance staff to maybe measure a couple things while they're in the weight room. And then obviously, athletic trainers can do the same in the training room or during their rehab sessions. Just pulling that data and maybe sitting down together and saying, okay, this is what I saw, this is what I saw. Let's, kind of compare and come up with something. But I think coaches obviously don't want their, players out with injury. And,
Right.
we like to keep our training room as calm and injury free as possible. So everyone's working for the same cause. So I think, especially at those lower levels, it's probably not feasible to have a third party. And it's honestly not really that necessary as long as there's, a good line of communication and everyone kind of knows what they're looking for. So that would take some effort, obviously, to get everyone on the same page. But if you had some easy data collection tools, I think it's, very, very doable at that level.
Awesome. Circling back to the one that I didn't want to forget, you know, and I pulled this from a lot of other smart people that I listen to, not within the athletic training realm, that kind of talk about this, but there's a lot of them, like data is great, but oftentimes data isn't enough to convince everyone that something needs to happen. Like they'll look at it and be like, great, but if there's no sell, if you will, or story behind it, is that something that, that they talked about in this boot camp, like, being able to take that data and tell a story around it or, put it into something that's a little bit more practical, but also just hitting with the hard facts of this is what it says. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a huge piece of data analytics. Kind of from the outside looking in, it seems like, yeah, they're just kind of crunching numbers on a computer, but especially in our bootcamp course, visualization is what they call it, is about a third of everything that you do in the bootcamp. And then I would even say it's probably bigger than a third of what you would do in the professional setting. So yeah, it's nice to clean these spreadsheets up, run some numbers, do some statistics on all that stuff. But if you can't make a clean visualization of what that story is, then you're going to have a lot harder time convincing your supervisor or stakeholder, or, whoever you're kind of presenting that to, that something needs to change. So I would say the visualization piece is huge, and I know some of the things that we would use were, Matplotlib is a big one for creating kind of interactive graphs, and Tableau is a huge free software where you create these storyboards for presentations. And so you're not only crunching all these numbers, but you have to make it make sense. Um, so it's a huge part of it. And I know that especially in like the financial and business side to data analytics, that's really the only piece that your employer sees. they might track your hours or whatever of what you're analyzing, but the stuff that they get to see is your final project, which is your visualization. Because that's going to display the stats that you picked out, the things that stuck out to you, the things that were statistically significant. You can't just write, yep, this had a good p-value on it. We're just gonna, talk about this in a meeting. No, you got to come with graphs, really, I mean, graphs is kind of a small chunk of it, but you've got to come with that visualization piece. Otherwise, they're gonna laugh at you and probably hire someone else. So,
That's fair.
um, so yeah, that's really a big piece. And when you think about just the way that we consume media, I'll be scrolling through social media, and if someone has a statement versus a pretty good evidence-based graph or chart or whatever that happens to be, I'm gonna spend a lot more time looking into that chart to see what are they actually saying by this statement here. It's kind of like it's like backing up your work. I picture it as like elementary math where you don't show your work, you don't get full grade. So um, that's kind of how I would describe the visualization aspect of the data stuff. How did you get to that number? And then, what does that really mean in the grand scheme of things? So
Sure.
that's what sells all your, really all the work you do data wise. It's, um, the meat and potatoes would be doing the statistics, sorting the data, even collecting the data is kind of tough sometimes. But if you can't sell it to somebody, then you really need to work on your visualization skills because that's where the big money is kind of made.
Appreciate that insight. You mentioned a couple ones. Kind of going into my next question, a couple resources that you just threw out there. But and if people were wanting to look at a course or a boot camp or anything else that you've come across, any and I put it in quotes, starter options now that you've gone through it, or things that you heard. I've pretended personally to like sort of try Code Academy, all their free stuff from time to time, and then I never stick with it. My own fault, but anything that you've come across that you would be like, hey, if this is where you're just trying to get a starter idea from, or just get enough to start, excuse me, figuring out, but without having to go full boot camp. Um, any recommendations?
Yeah, so I would say just YouTube honestly is a good starting point. Um, and then I would go to some of these boot camp websites, regardless if you want to do one or not, because they're going to list their curriculum, which shows everything that you're going to learn. I know the one that I took, it's mapped out. It was 2 days a week, so every day of that week, it would show you what you're going to learn and work on. And it was obviously very fast paced. So you're kind of learning a completely new software about once a week, if not more than that. So picking out kind of, okay, I see Python a lot. Maybe I'm going to look into Python a little bit, which is one of I would say, the biggest coding resources for more than just data analytics, but Python's a huge one.
Sure.
But just picking out kind of those things, okay, I see this all over. I see this on job postings. I see this on boot camps. Maybe I should look into this. So I would just type, Python for beginners into YouTube and just see, is that something that I want to focus a little bit more on, or is this going to be helpful for me in the long term? But that's kind of where I started, and I kind of compared a few boot camps and the different softwares that they teach because they do differ a little bit. And I picked one out just based on what I could apply to this field
Sure.
because I'm going to be honest, a lot of it is not sports medicine based or even athletics or there is a good amount of healthcare coverage. You do a lot of cool projects with um, you know just basically the advancement of healthcare administration stuff.
Sure.
That's the piece that I really like was okay, what softwares am I going to learn are going to carry over into this profession. So I would say Python's a great resource. Tableau is a great resource. JavaScript, even, if you want to create a little web page displaying stuff, Java and HTML are going to be fairly easy ways for you to do that without, jumping into a whole another realm of website creation. But I would just start there and just really look at the options that they have. A lot of them will cover Excel. They'll cover it quickly because Excel really isn't a huge, or I should say, a big data, analyst tool, but you can do a ton on Excel. So even just taking a course to learn more about Excel would be beneficial, especially in our setting, because Excel is either free or very cheap for people. And I think everyone knows a good handful of professionals that are keeping spreadsheets of, different things that they're tracking. So um, those would kind of be my, I would say, initial recommendations, and then, just go from there. But YouTube's a great resource. A lot of just beginner coding kind of websites and forums and stuff do a really good job of walking you through things. And then, yeah, just even if you start coding, like Joel said, he's kind of jumped back and forth into some of the coding stuff. Um,
Loosely understand the basics of HTML, very, very loosely.
but even just jumping into some of that, and say your code's not quite working, it's giving you an error, copy and paste that whole code into Google. You will find forums on people that are doing probably really close to the same thing. And there's always, I basically call them geniuses because they'll look at this code posting, post, their answer of how you can solve that. And there's basically an answer for any coding question out there. So, if you're maybe a little deeper into things and you're wondering why isn't this working? Why isn't it displaying the average of these, 40 times, for instance? Maybe you got a space that's in the wrong spot, or
Right.
I mean, it's very tedious, but those websites will help a ton in just pointing out the little things that you might need to change in your, 3, 4 lines of code that you have.
Well, it's mildly disheartening that Excel isn't that much of a data analytics tool yet. I feel like I use like a percentage of what it can do and still get baffled by it, but I completely understand.
Well, yeah, and I should rescind that a little bit. I mean, it's probably the most popular tool,
For
obviously.
sure.
I would say in the larger scheme of things, a lot of data analysts are handling data sets that are, 5 digits, 6 digits, 7 digits long as far as, rows and columns. So if you're handling a million different rows of data points, Excel is probably not going to be the best option for you. I don't know if you've had any big data sets on there, but once you get up into like that 5 digit, even sometimes the 4 digit stuff, row wise, that Excel is not going to respond very well to you. It's going to be
Sure.
surfing a, early 2000s internet browser as far as the speed of the site, and it's just not going to be able to keep up. So that's why I say Excel isn't a huge tool. But if you have manageable data sets, which for the most part is, with our profession, you're not going to have those millions and millions of rows unless you're tracking GPS coordinates every, tenth of a second or something like that. But
Right, right.
it is very applicable to us. So Excel is definitely a good starting point.
Fair enough. I appreciate you making me feel a little bit better about that. Anything else around data analytics and anything like that that we haven't covered that you wanted to before we kind of jump into a modified version of the AT chat questions?
I would say, not really anything big comes to mind, but it's not something you can just pick up overnight, is what I'll
Sure.
say. I finished my course in December, and obviously with winter sports and now spring sports are hitting pretty hard right now. Um, our profession, it's tough to find time to dig into some of that. So I would just say if anyone is trying to get started, make sure you pencil in a little bit of time each week to, even if you're just watching videos online or you're messing around with, a sample data set. That's still going to help you in the long run. So just make sure you stick with it. I've had a few weeks where I haven't done, much of anything, and then, I kind of regret, not hopping on the computer for, an hour maybe a couple times a week. And when I do stuff like that, it just kind of brings a lot of things into kind of a full picture. It helps me modify our workouts. It helps me modify my rehabs. And I don't have the data to back it up, which is ironic yet, but I feel like with some of those changes, we have had shorter times total in the ATR for injuries, and we have had some pretty big and quick advancements in the weight room, but I'm still working on piecing some of that together to actually support it. So that's really all I would add.
Gotcha. Well, then jumping into these, where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to data analysis? I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind kind of expanding.
Yeah, so I'll kind of rephrase it from before, but I think a lot of the newer EMRs are going to really help in this sense with just kind of pooling a lot of that data and tracking it, and not necessarily requiring athletic trainers to be the ones that work with it. But in my opinion, if you have someone on your staff that is a practitioner, maybe has good ties to the performance side of their team, or even clinic or wherever you're at, but then you're also able to analyze that data, you're, in my opinion, you're kind of leaps and bounds ahead of maybe a analyst that one day they'll work with a finance set, one day they'll work with an education set, and then all of a sudden, hey, they get a sports medicine project across their desk that's due in a week. Okay, yeah, they'll come up with some really good insights, but they won't necessarily know why we're looking at this certain body part or this joint, or you have such a leg up on the physiological aspect of what you're analyzing, um, that you're kind of in the driver's seat of how you're going to run things at whatever facility you're at. So I think it'd be nice to have more kind of dual credentialed um, athletic trainers in the future, but I think at the very least there's going to be a lot more opportunities to make differences based on data versus just kind of maybe you just do stuff because that's how you've always done it, which is my least favorite phrase in sports medicine. Um, so I think it'll really help just kind of revolutionize the way that we hand out rehabs and the way that we look at, strength and numbers in the weight room, or numbers out on the field, or numbers at combines. There's just such a high ceiling for that stuff that I don't see why it's not gonna kind of boom and be more readily available to people.
I like it. Again, something you kind of already touched on, but we'll have you answer it again. Thinking back on data that you could have collected or that you've seen collected or maybe not used how you would want to have done it, what advice did you go back and give yourself around that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I just wish I would have tracked more things. Obviously, you have to be mindful of people's medical records, but even if you can create an Excel spreadsheet and just give an athlete a number. And so then when you go back to that spreadsheet, you have data from maybe how long it took for them to come back from, a grade 3 ACL, or it doesn't even have to be surgical, but just kind of keeping a spreadsheet of kind of some of the things that you've worked with personally, to kind of track some of those time frames or some of those hypertrophy differences. That would have been something that I wish I would have done sooner, and not even necessarily like right out of school, but when I started my data boot camp, it would have been nice to start tracking some of those things, because you can still obviously keep it anonymous, and then that's something that you can just kind of keep in your portfolio to just keep working on, and keep kind of just working on different numbers and different statistics from those data sets that you create. So um, obviously we're practitioners first, but why can't you kind of backtrack and look at some of your successes and failures as that person's athletic trainer?
I like,
And I would also say, I guess, another small thing would be I wish I would have advocated more to my employer about, hey, can we maybe get this $200 device that we can use for 20 plus high schools, and I'll travel around and dedicate an hour or two working with certain teams and stuff. But I think that that's something that if you keep that price tag low, that's something that a lot of people will say yes to. So I wish I would have advocated more for some of that, and I'm starting to get some proposals and whatnot written to have some of that technology because like right now the position I'm in, we have a lot of large Milwaukee high schools that they do very well in sports. They have bigger sports budgets, and they're still kind of doing things the old way, I would consider
Sure.
it, where if we already have ties to a school, why can't we send someone in to work with them for, even if it's a couple hours or a few hours a week. I think that they would obviously enjoy that a lot, but it would bring in a lot of benefit to their athletics programs as well.
What has been the most influential resource that you found since taking this boot camp?
Yeah, so that's a good question because I have two good answers. One would be just some of the classmates that I met were much more experienced with the data analytics piece. And so just kind of bouncing ideas off them was great. But I would say another good piece is it's a website called Kaggle, Kaggle, and they host just tons of data sets. They're pretty much all free. They even have competitions. So our group did an NFL competition where the NFL gives you free data to work with, and it's all catapult data. It's game tracking data, so you know exactly what the play result was or what position they were in. But just having those data sets around to download and just work on. A big part of getting started in the field is building your own portfolio. So using Kaggle has been huge for me just to be able to find some of that stuff. Just because you see a lot of the traditional analytics pieces on there, which are finance and a little bit of healthcare, a lot of educational stuff, so like managing high school students and stuff like that. But there's not a lot of public sports or sports performance or injury prevention type data sets that you can find. And Kaggle has been a good resource for me to be able to kind of just sharpen up my skills, but do it with something that's applicable to me versus learning all that stuff with maybe a another profession that's not going to be very useful to me. So.
That makes a lot of sense. Uh, New question, not around data analytics, but as an AT in your role, how do you take care of yourself? And I won't believe you if you say looking at data sets, but
No, definitely not. Honestly, this is a piece that I need to get a lot better at. So, um, I mean, I definitely I enjoy my job and I'm very fortunate to be in the position I'm in, but I have had about a rough year and a half here of just dealing with a lot of outside, a lot of gun violence, a lot of people that don't have insurance. It's sad to see, but I've had a lot of 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that, they probably have a spondy or they definitely broke their arm. And, they kind of look at you and it's like, I don't have insurance. I can't go anywhere for this. And that is disheartening. And then to see the gun violence aspect on top and to see the direction that club sports is going. Not that it's a bad thing, but the volume that especially these like high school age kids are putting their bodies through, has just been tougher to deal with, especially considering they pay good money to be on these travel teams, and there's a lot of obviously moving pieces, but it just seems like the work never stops for us as athletic trainers. So I do need to do a bit better job, but I would say just kind of getting into more hobbies. I've always been an avid golfer, so I hadn't picked up a club in over a year and a half just from I felt like I was too busy. So getting back into golf was a big thing for me. Reading more books has been helpful. Otherwise, I am kind of a distant, quiet person. I think that's why I like data analytics because you can kind of just sit alone and analyze stuff in your own thoughts. But just kind of forcing myself to be around friends and family and all of that has also helped. So those would be my bits of advice, but I know I'm definitely not in a great position to give advice on that topic. So
Maybe record a few more podcasts in there.
yeah, I do need to kind of get back into it.
If you could change or eliminate one thing, could be just like a common misconception, um, or just anything around athletic training and data collection. What would it be?
Um, I feel like I could go a few different directions with this, but the main thing I would say is that we need to advocate for it better. And by we, I just mean the few people that do want to take on a bit more responsibility and maybe collect data or start analyzing stuff for your company. But I think the bigger piece of that is I think a lot of supervisors need to kind of look in the mirror and say, okay, um, should we get into this? One, but two, it's clearly been beneficial for just about everyone, especially in the sports medicine field, that has incorporated some aspect of at least research, if not kind of some ongoing data projects. So I think just eliminating the general thought of, oh, we can't afford that, or oh, we don't know where to start with that. And it's actually it can be very affordable depending on kind of the route you want to take. But it's not hard to find people that would enjoy doing something like that. So a lot of times, it's only really a couple more hours a week as far as the tracking piece goes. And then, it does require a little bit more time when you're going to analyze stuff, but you're not analyzing every day. You might analyze maybe once every couple weeks with the data that you have from those last couple weeks. So I think just kind of getting that piece out of more of kind of the higher ups in your company's head of like, hey, we can afford this. Let's try to do something different here, and it's probably going to bring in revenue since we're doing something different. So that would be a big piece for me that I would say that needs to change a little bit.
I like it. Last question. What does being an athletic trainer with data analytics skills mean to you?
Oh man, I don't even know to be honest. It's all been happening so fast. I would say um, I enjoy being kind of a Swiss Army knife, if that makes sense.
Sure.
It's nice to be the one that people go to maybe ask some of the fringe questions where, okay, yeah, it deals with rehab, but it might also deal with technology or, especially like weight room things. I'm definitely not, you could see from my physique that, I don't practice what I preach often, but it's nice to be able to, show the data and be able to teach the exercise or to explain to the football coach or volleyball coach or whoever that, hey, this is why you should be doing it, instead of just riding them all the time to do ankle prevention programs. Show them graphs that you made, show them spreadsheets. um, I think that that's just been a huge piece of kind of it's kind of in my identification now. People know that they're going to get concrete evidence and data to support what I'm telling them to do. Um, and I will say I'm a little bit lower on that on the rehab side, mostly just due to volume of patients and whatnot. But eventually, I would like to catch up and do a lot more analysis on my rehab sessions, so that you might have a parent come in and say, "Hey, why aren't you taping my kid's ankle anymore?" It's like, well, we wanted to strengthen it back up. They're essentially 100% now, but then you have data to back that up. Um, and so I think just being able to, show your work and just show your worth as well, being able to kind of bounce around the whole sports med department is, um, you know, to me, that just means that I add value to a company. And I think that's a big piece that a lot of young athletic trainers struggle to find right away is, yeah, they're giving me a paycheck. Yeah, I'm covering some events and stuff, but I think a lot of people feel like they're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, which is, it's justified. You kind of got to prove yourself at a lot of companies, but when you start adding these skill sets that not a lot of your coworkers have, you start to become a lot more valuable. And so that was a big piece for me, is just kind of a self-assurance that, hey, I can do a lot of these things that, maybe our supervisors are questioning, or maybe some big pieces that we need to fill as a company. You can kind of step up to the plate and really get your hands dirty and prove that worth with something like this attached to your practitioner license.
Awesome. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, connect, ask questions or maybe, guidance on, if they're looking to get into this, what would be the best place for them to either follow you or connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm not I use social media, but I say that in I kind of mindlessly scroll through my feed like once a day. But I do respond to a lot of messages on there. So, I have a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, stuff like that. I also have an email that's fairly easy to find if you Google my name.
And thank you for listening to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. Sorry, we were having some technical difficulties at the end, so it was kind of an abrupt stop, but technology kept freezing up on us. But hope you enjoyed this episode with Greg and talking data analysts, data scientists, and got some ideas on if this is something you want to look to pursue in your future and what it could mean. Thank you again just for listening and for bearing through the ad at the beginning and then here again at the end. We truly appreciate it. All of that revenue, which is unfortunately not a ton, but it is impactful, goes directly to our Throw a Lifeline program. We're getting very close to being able to fulfill our next one. If you haven't checked it out yet, please check out the Athletic Training Daily Journal. We are available on Amazon. If you're curious about what it is, there's a downloadable 14-day sample on clinicallypress.org/shop. No payment entry required, but you can get an idea of what it is and if it's something that would be beneficial to you. Thank you again for listening to this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.